Hello everybody, this is Rabbi Gershom Francis, and you're listening to our podcast called Toras HaArizal. On this podcast, we'll describe the kavanos of the Arizal for Chol, Shabbos, and Yomim Tovim. This year is dedicated in memory of my father, Rabbi Menachem Mendel ben Avram Olav Hashalom. When the Rebbe from Toldos Aaron, Reb Avram Yitzchak Zichrono Livracha, had a yechidus with the Lubavitcher Rebbe, he asked, who is able to reach all these levels and to be mechav in all the kavanos that are explained in Kisvei Arizal? The Lubavitcher Rebbe replied, if so, who was the Siddur of the Shalah and the Rashash printed for? For sure not the Yechidi Segula, since the Yechidi Segula already had the Kisvei Yad. The Lubavitcher Rebbe explained that the Ksavim were printed in order to make this Chachma accessible for everybody. This is specifically true after the times of the Baal Shem Tov and his students. Now, if a person can't be mechaven, or if they don't have time, then they should simply daven with kavana, and be'ezras Hashem, everything will be achieved. But if someone is able to be mechaven, then they're not fulfilling their obligation when they don't. Just like Nagdimin in the Gemara who gave tzedakah, but he didn't give tzedakah as a rich person of his magnitude should. So too, if a person is able to daven with pnimis HaTorah, with kavanos Arizal, but they remain on the level of pshat, they're not doing their avodah. Sfarim write that it's a mitzvah to learn Seder Hishtalshalos. The Alter Rebbe stresses this point greatly. Here we're doing more. We're learning inyanim as they're applied to kavanas tefillah. The Baal Shem Tov said that in today's day and age, our avodah is tefillah. And in one tefillah, we could literally go through all of Seder Hishtalshalos. Now, when we are mechaven down here on earth, we cause zivugim and yichudim to be made up in Shamayim. And when we make these zivugim and yichudim, it makes it good for us down here on earth. In the Sefer Shari Eira, as well as in Teshuvas Arivash, there's a general mashal of understanding kavanos hatfila with shemos hakedoshim and sfiros and how they interact with each other. The mashal is a person that goes to the king and asks for something. If they ask properly, the king will direct them to the right general and to the right chamber, to the right oitzer to get what they need. But if not, then the person might end up going to the wrong chamber, to the wrong sar, and that makes things very difficult. The Tzemach Tzedek asked in Derech Mitzasecha, why don't we simply daven to Or Ein Sof for what we need? Why be mechavein kavanos and get into all these details? While it's obviously true that everything is in Hashem's hands, nevertheless, when a person intends for the wrong oitzer, it takes a big zchus for Hashem to bring the person's bakasha to the right oitzer. So too it is with kavanos Arizal. When we have kavanos Arizal, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is bringing our bakashas to the right place. Whereas, on the other hand, when we're not mechavein according to the Sod, it takes a big zchus for Hashem to make things right for us. We can understand this from dealing with people every day. Normally, when we want to bring out a good midah from a person, we praise that midah, and more of that midah comes out. That's the idea in Kabbalah called mayin nukvin. We arouse the midah, and in order that there could be mayin duchrin, there could be more of that midah, more of a hashpa of that midah. So again, the Tzemach Tzedek speaks about this in his Derech Mitzasecha, and he asks, what's the Maila in Yechudim and Shemos? It's only a drop in the bucket in comparison with Hashem's Ein Sof. And he goes on to explain that the Spheros and Kalim, they are through Tzimtzumim. But nevertheless, within these Spheros and within these Kalim is Or Ein Sof itself. So in a sense, when we're having Kavanah for Shemos and Spheros, we're having kavanah for the Or Ein Sof within these spheros, within these kalim. And through Yechudim, it causes a unity of these Keches Atzumim, which contain the Ein Sof, which is the Yichud of Abba and Ima, a Yichud of Zun. That's the pshat of the pasuk Asakvehu ki yad Hashemi, that Hashem will uplift the person because he knows Hashem's name. Meaning, when you know how Hashem interacts with the world through Spheros and Shemos and Yechudim, your request is easily uplifted. Gilui Seiras HaTorah is also the great marker of Moshiach. This was the whole simcha of Lag BaOmer, as the Bnei Yissaschar says, that it was the day when Rishus was given to the Rashbi and his students to write down Seiras HaTorah. The Tikkunei Zohar says that all of Shamayim, Eliyahu Hanavi, Yeshiva Shalmaila, and Shemos HaKadoshim and Sfiros were given permission to give access to Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai and his students to understand and teach Seiras HaTorah and to make the Zohar accessible to everyone. Normally this is something that shouldn't have been done until the time of Moshiach. But Rabbi Shimon, because of his chus, he was able to bring down Pnimis HaTorah even before Moshiach. In another place in the Zohar, it says that through learning this Chachma, Yibkun Beimin Galusa Barachame. In other words, that Chavli Mashiach don't have such an achiza on us. On the other hand, Reb Chaim Vital said that when we hold back from learning Chachmas HaEmes, Mashiach is held back. Now, even if in earlier days there was a concept of Hastara, Tachas L'Shonech, nevertheless, now, as Reb Chaim Vital says, Mitzvah Umutur Legalis Zeisa Chachma. The Lubavitch Rebbe says in his Sichos that limud of this Chachma is for two reasons. One is to combat Cheshchas HaGalus, and the other is to bring Mashiach. The Rebbe gave the Horah and said, Chapara in Eden, that people should jump on the bandwagon to learn Pnimis HaTorah. When Mashiach comes, everyone will be busy learning about Hashem in the highest way. For this, we need to prepare, just like we prepare for Einig Shabbos, by tasting a little bit of Shabbos beforehand. But more than this, the Divrei Yoel explained that Pnimis HaTorah is not just a segula to bring Mashiach, but rather it's part of the coming of Mashiach itself. Limud Pnimis HaTorah and Limud Kabbalah is part of the coming of Mashiach. The reason for the necessity of Chachmas HaKabbalah is due to the fact that there is Yeridas Adoros. And to counteract the Yeridas Adoros, Hashem was Magdim Refuah L'Maka and set a mechanism in place which is Gilui Seidas HaTorah. This is explained with that famous mashal from the Alter Rebbe of the son of the king that's very sick and needs one of the jewels on the king's crown. Even though the jewel is on the king's crown, the king is willing to take that jewel off of his crown for his son, in order that it should be a cure for his son and make his son better. So too, learning Pnimis HaTorah, Seidas HaTorah, Chachmas HaKabbalah, even though it's on the king's crown, it's Pnimis HaTorah, it's Tachas L'Shonech, nevertheless Hashem is willing to give that to us in order to bring Mashiach. The Chafetz Chaim said that without Sisrei Torah, the world would be in the dark. If you take a look at the Sefer HaManhagas Chafetz Chaim, it says over there that if the world didn't need a work on Lashon Hara, then he would have spent all of his time, the Chafetz Chaim would have spent all of his time learning Kabbalah and Kavanos. The Vilna Gaon said that Mashiach is supposed to come in the merit of Limud Kabbalah, and he mentions this in a few places. In his Sefer Even Shlomo, he says that the Ikar of Geula will come through learning Kabbalah. Now in this day and age it's even more opportune, and let me explain why. In Parshas Noach it says, B'shnas sheish meyes l'chayei Noach, b'chodesh hasheni, b'shiva asar yom l'chodesh, b'yom hazeh nivku kol ma'anos tohem rabba, v'arubas hashamayim niftachu. In the 600th year of Noach's life, all the well springs of the great deep bursted forth, and the gates of the heavens were opened. Now the Zohar says that the Kabbalah on this is that ubishis ma l'shsisa yisparchun tare de chachmasa le'ela amabue de chachmasa latata v'yistatkun alma la'ala b'shvia. That in the 600th year of the 6th millennium, which is the year 5600 in the Jewish calendar, corresponding to the year 1840, the gates of wisdom, which is chachmas HaKabbalah, together with the well springs of wisdom below, will open up and the world will prepare to usher in the 7th millennium. The Leshem, as well as Rabbi Avram Azulai, wrote that any gezerah on this chachma was taken away after the year 5600. After the year 5600, all the gezerahs on this chachma are off. Now, interestingly enough, Reb Aaron Strasheller, who was a Talmud of the Alter Rebbe, made a fascinating point. He said that on the one hand, you see that there's a command to spread this chachma, since through limud of this chachma people will be uplifted and Mashiach will come. But on the other hand, there are also places which explain the need to conceal this chachma. It's known that Reb Chaim Vital wrote down Kabbalah in a very concealed way, so much so that the Vilna Gaon said that he wasn't even sure if Reb Chaim Vital understood the Arizal until he read Reb Chaim Vital's Maimer Psias Shel Avram Avinu. The Arizal himself only taught a very select few people. But if it's a mitzvah to be megala, this chachma, why all of the hastara? Rabbi Shashela comes to a fascinating conclusion. He makes a calculation, and he comes to the point to say that Reb Chaim Vital had his writings buried with him and didn't want to teach his Eitz Chaim until 100 years after his death. Why? Reb Chaim Vital passed away in the year 5380. And the Baal Shem Tov was born in the year 5450. That's about 70 years after Reb Chaim Vital. And hence, the kavanah for the Hastara was that they should wait. They should wait until the arrival of the Baal Shem Tov, the Magid, and the Alter Rebbe to begin to teach Chachmas HaKabbalah in an unbelievable way. Other Sfarim assert that Reb Chaim Vital may have understood a sign that he received from the Arizal, his Rebbe. Before the Arizal passed away, he had his Talmidim around him. They were all upset that he was passing away because there would be no one to teach them Seder Satorah anymore. The Arizal said that if there was a schus, he would come back and teach his students this chachma. Reb Chaim Vital passed away in the year 5380, and the Rashash was born in the year 5463. That's 83 years later. The Mekubalim say that the Rashash was actually a nitzutz of the Arizal. The great Mekubal Reb Aram Pereira said that the Rashash came to clarify all that was previously taught. And the Mekubal Rabbi Didya Abulafia said that whoever learns Eitz Chaim without the commentary of the Rashash is like a blind man walking in the dark. So between these two great tzaddikim, the Rashash and the Baal Shem Tov, they arrive close to the 100-year period as Reb Chaim Vital would have wanted. And they were megala this chachma like never before. It's interesting to note that the Ramchal was also born around that time. He was born 5467, which is 87 years later. There's a Kabbalah that the Mezritcher Magid said that the Ramchal was one of the biggest tzaddikim of his dor, but his dor wasn't zeicha to fully accept him. The Baal Shem Tov was megala himself and changed the way we look at Pnimius HaTorah, and the Rashash eventually took over the yeshiva of Mekubalim in Eretz Yisrael and changed the way we understand Kavanas Arizal. More than that, the Rashash was 27 when the Baal Shem Tov had Aliyas HaNeshama on Rosh Hashanah. We're all familiar with the great letter from the Baal Shem Tov about his Aliyas HaNeshama on Rosh Hashanah, where he describes that he and his Rebbe went up Madrega Achar Madrega until he went to the Heichel Moshiach, where Moshiach learns Torah with the Tanaim and Tzaddikim and the Shiva Royim, and the Baal Shem Tov asked the Moshiach, Emas Asimar, when will you come? When will Moshiach come? And Moshiach answered, B'zeis Teda, this is the Siman, Be'eshi Isparsim Lemudcha V'yizgala Ba'olam V'yefutzu Ma'anasecha Chutza Mashi L'madti Yoscha V'yisagta. At the time when your teachings will spread out and it'll be revealed in the world, and the well springs of Kabbalah and Pnimis HaTorah will spread outwards, what I have taught you and what you've understood, v'yuchlu gam hema la'asas yichudim ba'aliyos kamecha, and that they will also be able to do yichudim and aliyos just like you. V'az yikalu kol ha'klipos v'yiyah eis ratzon v'yeshua, and then all the klipos will be banished, and then it'll be a time of deliverance. The letter ends off over there that the Baal Shem Tov says, Ach zois ani maidiyacha, that I could let you know one key that you can take out, and that is that be'ez tefilascha v'limudcha v'chodibur v'dibur v'moitzis v'sacha techavin l'yachet shem. That when you daven, you should have in mind that through every word that you're davening, you're being miyached Hashem's name. One time, when the Baal Shem Tov received rebuke for teaching Seder Satorah, he replied these words: the way I explain things allow a person to understand Olam Yisrael Yonim. I explain that this world contains all that is in Shamayim, so that the Gashmias of this world can become Ruchni. But you who explain everything above as it is, you make it so that the Ruchnias becomes Gashmias. So by the time 100 years was given by Reb Chaim Vital is done, the Limud Torah of Pnimis HaTorah, Chachmas HaKabbalah, and Chassidus is like never before, culminating in the year 6600, which is the year 1840, which is where the Mayanis of Chachma are finally open, and Rishus is given to spread this Chachma. After the aforementioned, it's no shock that the words Mibisari Echza Elikai, which Eov said, that from my body I'll understand Hashem, comes to have a great significance. Svarim write that the words Mibisari is really an acronym. It's a Rashi Teves for Mereinu Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, which is the Rashbi, Mereinu Rabbi Yitzchak ben Shlomo, which is the Arizal, Mereinu Rabbi Yisrael ben Sarah, which is the Baal Shem Tov, and Mereinu Rabbi Shalom ben Yitzchak, which is the Rashash. Now, in truth, when you look at that 100-year mark, you see that from that time and onwards, there were amazing Giluyim and Tzaddikim. Interestingly enough, Rabbi Yaakov Abuchatzira was born in the year 5566, and the Masayda is that by the time he was 6 years old, he was already Baki in Seides HaTorah. That means that he was born 5 or 6 years short from that year, which was 100 years exactly from Reb Chaim Vital's death. And so by the time the 100-year mark was reached, Rabbi Yaakov Abuchatzira was already Bakim all Pnimis HaTorah. So we see in some way or another, from this point and onwards, there was Yispaschon Sha'arei Chachma. The Sha'arei Chachma were revealed. The 100 mark is passed, 1840 is passed, and there's a Gila of this Chachma. And there was no holding back from this point and onwards. Ironically, we have to mention here that Rabbi Yaakov Abuchatzira actually had a son that he named Yitzchak, because he saw that his son also had a nitzutz of the neshama of the Arizal, who was named Yitzchak, and he's named after him. During this time, there was Giluyim of Moshiach Tzidkenu. You have the Or HaChaim HaKadosh, and Sfarim write that the Or HaChaim had a Ruach of Mashiach, and the Baal Shem Tov had a Nefesh of Mashiach, and if they would have met, Mashiach would have came. But don't get mistaken, the point here isn't that one tzaddik was born or another tzaddik was born, but rather during these key years there was an outpour of Pnimiyas HaTorah, an outpour of tzaddikim who learned Pnimiyas HaTorah and are megala it like never before. It's mentioned in the name of Reb Pinchas Koratzer that the Alter Rebbe was a new neshama, and he explained that new neshamas only come down once in 500 years. Now, Reb Chaim Vital explains in his Shara Kavanos that a person who concentrates on the Kavanas Ari and the Zivugim that are done every day, from the beginning of the day, which is at night, until the end of the day, which is at Mincha, they achieve a wondrous greatness. And that it is no doubt that a person who knows how to be mechaven these Yichudim and Kavanos and Zivugim, there's no limit to his char. There's nothing higher, says Reb Chaim Vital. He becomes included in the category of Tzaddik Geyser v'Hakadosh Baruch Hu Mekayim, that a Tzaddik decrees on earth and their words come true in Shamayim. In fact, Reb Chaim Vital wrote that in truth a person is pashat born to learn this Chachma. And this is very important when it comes down to Avodas Tefillah. It's explained that Olam HaAtzilus, which is the highest world, is Kulei Tov. Bria is Rubai Tov, Yitzira is Mechza al Mechza, and Asiya is Rubai Lechetzonim. When a person is mechaven Kavanas Tefillah only b'pshitus, only according to the simple text, so that means that their davening is a davening of Olam HaAsiya. And since there's a ribai of Klippa in Olam HaAsiya, so it could be that the Klippa is sholet on their davening, and they have a harder time davening, and they have a harder time having Kavana, and they have a harder time uplifting themselves. But those who are mechaven according to Sayyid and Kavanas Tefillah, they're not bothered as much during Avodas Tefillah. They don't have so much achiza from the chitzonim, because chitzonim be'ikr have very or little achiza in Olam Yisrael Yonim. So when a person is mechaven according to how things are by Olam Yisrael Yonim, the klippa has less achiza on him, and his tefillah goes up a lot easier. And ultimately, their kavanas at tefillah brings their tefillah directly to HaKadosh Baruch Hu and directly to the right place, and makes a bigger pu'ula down here on earth.